My feeling is that it's imperative for people in this community, this great community, particularly if you've been fortunate enough to be successful in it, to sort of be involved in the community, you know, and to a certain extent giving back, but also more importantly, supporting local foundations, you know, local interests, if you will. So for us, what that turned into as a starting point, KNME. So that was our initial departure to get out into the public space with the idea that that is the image that we wanted to portray, which is how we saw ourselves, which was literally educated, opinionated, interested, and interesting. I mean, if you will, it's a thoughtful way to, instead of sort of like a shotgun thrown out, like, or a cannon all over the United States, trying to pick different avenues, venues to expose yourself. We literally started with a single program, and everything has been an offshoot from that, you know, and in a sort of a logical way.
And you came to the conclusion that you were going to support Channel 5, and you've been supporting now for a number of years.
Exactly.
And is it helping your business? Do you think it makes any difference to the number of people who walk in your front door?
I think it does. Well, what's interesting is that the people that watch the programming on Channel 5 mention it to me. They kind of go out of their way and they'll say, you know, thanks for supporting Channel 5. I mean, they make a point of it, as opposed. It's really the only venue that that they'll mention to me. Which I think really compelling, because you know, people that watch Channel 5 tend to be zealots of the channel itself, right? You know, I mean, they're believers in it, and they want their family exposed to programs like this, and it's more of a learning process and fun, and you don't have to worry about, you know, odd commercials and off-color language and stuff. And I mean, that's a really important thing. You know, I have a 19-year-old and a 10-year-old. And, you know, sort of monitoring the TV is not on my list of wants to do over the course of a night. So.
That's right. That's terrific. How long have you been out here? About 14 years?
Yeah, we moved here in 1995.
Right.
So I moved here from New York City. Came primarily because of the high altitude here in New Mexico. So I wanted to be at a location at roughly 5,000 feet, a little bit more, which is where my office is. Due to the fact that people don't wear contact lenses comfortably at this altitude.
So why do people at higher altitudes have trouble with contact lenses?
Because the theory with contact lenses is it's based on the fact that oxygen has to diffuse across the lens. So that's how it works.
Because the eye itself doesn't get any oxygen.
Exactly.
Right.
So a soft contact lens particularly diminishes that oxygen flow. So at sea level, when there's more available oxygen, people wear them relatively comfortably. The higher you go in altitude, it becomes more uncomfortable, if you will. So it's impossible at Mount Everest. It's reasonable at sea level. It's difficult at 5,000 feet.
Right.
So I get people who are just, you know, very motivated. Like, it gets windy and dry here, and I just can't, you know, do it anymore.
And what do you think about this place, New Mexico?
You know, there's so many brilliant people here. The atmosphere here for me, and being sort of a technology-driven person, it's just a great place to be.
Is it harder to be in business in a place like this where people are smart?
No, well, for me, it's better.
It is better.
Yeah,
okay.
Because it's very, you know, what I do is obviously elective, and it's a very interactive specialty, if you will. So it's a lot of questions, it's a lot of answers, and you know, I'm fully involved with the latest and greatest technologies. As you know, we do testing for the FDA and whatnot. One instrument that I have in my office, it's referred to as an aberrometer, which measures the wavefront exiting an eye, was developed by some of the smartest people that I've ever met. Who left? They spun out of Sandia and started a company called Wavefront Sciences, and built this aberrometer that was, for a very large sum of money, was bought by the laser manufacturer that I use, and it was literally about 4 miles from here.
Wow!
So when the laser manufacturer acquired this New Mexico company, I had friends of mine from across the country calling me saying, "What is the story with this aberrometer?" Because the data points, for instance, that it's able to gather is sort of on an order of magnitude greater than any aberrometer in the world. So that's how it's actually, you know, directly influenced me here in New Mexico.
What are some of the new things that are happening in your world?
Well, you know, there's a lot of emphasis right now on computer interfaces, and because it's such an easy modality, you know, obviously you can see a computer, you can get into a program, use a mouse, and there's a particular emphasis right now on improving a person's contrast sensitivity or the ability to see a dark letter on a white background. So high contrast people can see typically very well, and as the lens in your eye changes or you age, your contrast sensitivity diminishes, and they're finding that there are ways that you can actually modulate that and improve contrast sensitivity based on computer programs.
Well,
it's
now,
really compelling.
If you're in my age range, that's an important conversation.
It's a very important conversation.
Because it becomes more difficult, obviously, to be able to do that and to be able to control that. Stephen, I was thinking earlier, when you work on somebody's eyes, you're working on basically the anatomy of that particular organ, but it also is necessary for them to figure out, they have to do some things on their own to be able to fully take advantage of what you're doing with that front end part of it.
Exactly. Okay. I mean, well, there's, from my perspective, what I do is adjust the power of the eye. And once you have the power of the eye adjusted so the images fall where they should, we've known that for years, that's, for instance, with cataracts. You eliminate the cataract, the image gets where it should. What really, this piece of the puzzle, which is, and I feel very fortunate to be sitting here with you because this has come on my radar, and ironically, in the past 6 months. So that I go to conferences year-round, worldwide, and I can tell you that what we're talking about tonight and what specifically you're talking about is something that it's recurring. So, back to the point. In the scenario where an eye has the proper power, what we're talking about is finding a way to modulate the way that a person interprets the images. By way of example, and my staff would verify this, occasionally, and probably about once a month, I'll have a patient that will come into my office and barely be able to see the big E on the chart, which, as you may know, is like 2,400, legally blind, which I think is a very poor descriptor, but legally blind. And with no glasses, with no contacts. And we say to them, how'd you get here? And they kind of look like, what do you mean? I see fine. Which is to say that they're under the eye is mispowered, but they're under the impression that they see fine, and vice versa. Sometimes I get some patients that, from my perspective, looking at them, think, man, they see great. And they might have a tiny prescription in one eye, maybe not, and they'll say, gosh, I just don't see so well, because their brain is telling them they don't see well, or vice versa. So this whole idea of neuroplasticity, particularly with respect to the occipital lobe, to me is a really fascinating thing, because I listen to people all day long talking to me about the way that they see. And it's an interesting thing.
Well, and what we've learned in doing these shows is that the biggest portion of the brain is dedicated to the information that comes in visually.
Exactly.
I wonder what your brain looks like.
Yeah.